Welcome to Goishi Talks. In this episode, we have something special and important from the EV industry. His company is leading the infrastructure change in India, also taking us forward with the latest technology. We have a dreamer in house, the chief dream merchant of Quench, Mr. Ravin. Welcome, Ravin, to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me on board.
I would like to start with the name Quench, but before that, how did a large multinational company like Adon move to charging station business? Where did that inception of thought happen?
Thanks for asking that question, and also the compliment. We're not really a large multinational corporation, multinational maybe, but not large on the scale of what the big companies are. We, in fact, over the last 50 years, have been making equipment for people who make batteries.
Okay.
So whether you are packing a cell, making a cell, testing a cell, forming the entire battery pack, or creating something that's going to store energy, we make equipment for you. And most of the battery companies in India, Asia, and parts of Africa have had equipment supplied by us for the longest amount of time.
You're humble.
That's very kind of you to say. So in the middle of the last decade, we noticed that there was a big transition from lead acid to lithium ion chemistries. And so we knew that the age of EVs was dawning upon us because it was happening around the world. And so we knew we had to make EV chargers. So on the 24th of March 2020, when we were all locked in during the lockdown, we had nothing to do. We knew we had 90 days. And so we split the entire company into 3 teams. A team to do street furniture, to do power electronics and software controllers to create an EV charger. And so by about June, we stacked it up as a design, and we knew that we had an EV charger and it was good. We were happy with what we came up with, so we decided to go forward with it. The crux of my message, though, is we had forever were helping people to charge batteries. It was just in a lab. So the leap for us wasn't a big leap technologically to make an EV charger. It was really a big leap in the mechanical engineering sphere. It was to make equipment that is street furniture, that is safe, that is reliable, that looks good, and that is easy and frictionless for people to use as customers. So most of our efforts went into that because we were already quite comfortable with battery charging.
So I want to divide the next question into 2 aspects. One is that when it comes to 2020, the industry was in the beginning stage. It's still in the beginning stage, but in infant stage. Probably just Tata Tigor is in the market, and we're all skeptical about what's going to happen. But people are saying that it's going to, it's going to be very big and all. So how did that market study and how did that vision happen? What was the inside thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, so as an entrepreneur, you should never go by your gut. All your decisions should be driven by data. And you're absolutely right. When we launched, it was only Bharat DC001 vehicles. It was the Mahindra and the Tata taxi vehicles that were around. The Nexon launched 7 months after we launched the chargers. And absolutely right, it was in late 2021. But the data we had from the customers that we were supplying to, who were making lithium batteries for automotive for 4 years, demonstrated that this was coming.
Comes from the inside of the industry.
Exactly, because we were seeing the lead indicators. And also as an aside, I think it was 2019, we went to one of our big customers in Europe, the Warwick Manufacturing Group, WMG, their lab, one of the best labs in Europe for testing batteries. They use a lot of our equipment, and they took us across the street to the Lord Bhattacharya building where Jaguar Land Rover was doing a lot of research, and walked us into a room where we saw 7 Tata vehicles being tested as EVs, way before Tata had ever announced that they were going to make EVs. And so when we put those 2 data points together, it was quite clear that the EV revolution was coming.
It's coming. So on the other hand, that's my second question. When we come to this kind of a market, especially in a terrain like India, where Kashmir is like -40, -50, when it comes to Kerala, it's +50 or +52. So how do you test these things, and what would be the safe parameters that a new company like a company that is getting into that charging station market will consider, and what are we doing regarding that?
So in fact, when we first launched, because the market in India was very small, we went overseas very quickly. And at that point, we started getting business from difficult countries. It wasn't, because the European suppliers were already dominating the countries that were, already adopting electric vehicles. So our interest was coming from far north of Sweden or from countries in the Middle East, who have very difficult conditions that were not being serviced by the present vendors or suppliers of that day. And so, one of our first Swedish customers asked to deploy our charger in the far north of Sweden in winter, where it's -55. And then later we had another customer in the Gulf that wanted to deploy in the desert in plus 55. And so we had these two extremes. And when you look at any of the equipment inside the charger, whether it's the power electronics or the switchgear, the cables, each of these are components that you are integrating that are made by other big, large multinational companies. And they are rated to maybe plus 49 or minus 45. So there's no way you can certify your charger because the componentry is only certified for less than that. Certified for either minus 45 or plus 49. So for us, the challenge was, okay, how do we give our customer comfort that we have designed, whether it is the thermal extraction or the heating inside the charger, in a way that handles those kind of climates beyond the tolerance of the components we are using by managing the tolerance of the components we're using. So having designed for both those conditions, then we created the test chambers. The minus 54 degrees it was, test chamber was quite an innovation because we created a cold box, basically. It was quite a big cold room, about half the size of this room. And we use liquid nitrogen to basically gasify liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen is at minus 198 degrees. And then it was gasified into this chamber. And so the chamber temperature where the charger was switched on permanently was dropped over 5 days from ambient to minus 54. And then we kept it at minus 54 with all the converters on, the charger on for 30 days.
30 days.
And at the end of the 30 days, we then opened the chamber with the appropriate safety gear because you were going to get asphyxiation from the nitrogen and shock charged a vehicle, right, to see if the charger was able to charge, and the charger did. So that was the only way we could certify or validate, perhaps is a better word, that we had designed to be able to handle those conditions. On the plus 55 side, we used a big oven in our factory. We have ovens in our factory, so we used a big oven. We took the oven to 60 degrees, put the charger in, and held the charger there for 30 days at that temperature.
The same process on the other side.
Except we did one more thing. We had to recreate a dust storm because you get dust storms in the desert. So after 30 days, we then clogged the filters. We put dirty filters for the air extraction. So it reduced the amount of air and thermal exchange that was going on with the air extraction for another 15 days to see how the charger performed. And we were happy to validate that the charger did. Yes, you will get degradation. You get performance degradation on both sides because that's just the reality of physics. But the charger worked and the charger was able to charge a car, and that was what we were validating.
This is fascinating because we had people coming and say, oh, this is not safe. We had people who come to say, charging station, is it safe? But to listen to the true story about what goes inside before producing or before certificating that this is safe is really fascinating. I can see that the company decided to get into this, charging station business. There is market study going on. There is specific exclusive information coming from OEMs, and then the testing market is happening. So, do you think the Indian customers are justifying that thoughts in terms of market and numbers of EVs that is selling and coming to the market?
You can answer that question in any way you want.
Okay.
Because if you were to look at just the volume of Indian cars versus what has been implemented or adopted, you'd get a negative image. And yet if you were to compare what India has adopted versus everybody else, you'd get a very positive image. What do I mean? In 2021, you would see a green number plate once a week. And in 2022, that became once a day. And in 23, it became once an hour. And now it's almost once a minute, right? So if you look at the adoption, and how it's going, it's phenomenal, right? Clearly, the biggest adoption is in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segment, right? And then after that, it's in the bus segment. The car segment is yet to come. But I think the story for India isn't about the cars. The cars will happen anyway. The story for India is the conversion of public transportation to green, right? And green is electric and hydrogen.
So you're betting in the public transportation will be the next segment that will be booming in terms of EV adaptation, right?
I wouldn't say we are betting as our business plan on that, but I absolutely would vouch that the big move over the next 3 years in India will be public transportation. First, the intra-city buses, then the intercity buses, and then intercity trucking will move to electric transportation as the technology improves and charging times become faster and charging becomes safer, and you can manage summer temperatures, and lithium cells are starting to be made in India, and the price of batteries drop, which means the price of the buses and the trucks will drop as well. The cars will happen anyway, right? And the cars again will be led by fleet companies, new innovations in battery as a service or mobility as a service. So all of that will happen. But if you look at 2030, you'll actually be looking back going, hang on a minute, like a majority of my two-wheelers are electric. an overwhelming majority of my three-wheelers are electric, and an overwhelming majority of my buses that transport people inside the city are electric. And that's the true story of electrification in India.
From all that we are discussing, I wanted to put you a scenario here. So let's say two-wheeler market. India is considered as one of the major two-wheeler EV two-wheeler market in the world. One of the leaders of it, because Ather is there, a lot of new companies, River is there, fantastic bikes. We also tested that. But on the other hand, there is a hesitancy from the customers to adapt to that passenger car market, right? That is what we are specifically mentioning. And I can also see that an array of new cars coming to the industry. In that context, go to 2020, we have been seeing cars with 19 kilowatt, 20 kilowatt, 22 kilowatt, and now it's reached 100 kilowatts right now. And all the chargers that we are installing, we are looking up to 120, 160, something like that. So do you think the charging facility is going to go much further from here, and how Quench is equipped with that? How the plan of Quench to, kind of cater that change?
I wouldn't say that there is a hesitancy for adoption of electric vehicles or electric cars in India. The reality was you only had 3 cars in 2022. Right?
Yes.
That became 6 or 7 cars in 2023, and this year that's going to change radically.
Yeah.
The other difference was you could only buy a car 25 lakhs or 19 lakhs 2-3 years ago, right? Then a number of players changed that by offering much cheaper cars.
Yes.
And now the other end of the spectrum is coming. At that 25 to 35 lakh price range, you're getting a significantly upgraded vehicle with fantastic mileage and fantastic comfort. Like if you looked at the latest cars that have been brought in by Mahindra, phenomenal, right? So the hesitancy came from the lack of choice and then a lack of knowledge, right?
Okay.
Today you can travel from Kashmir to Cochin in an electric car and have absolutely no problem in charging. Yes, there's still windows, where there isn't charging. For example, in Eastern India might be, in some states, and also in the Northeast might be some states. But for an overwhelming majority of India, you can drive an electric car and have no problem charging. As that experience becomes normal, you'll find the hesitancy to buy cars that are electric will reduce because you're getting a cheaper car or a better car at the same price, and you know that you don't have a problem in charging. And let's not forget, 80% of charging is done at home on an AC charger. It's really not done on a DC charger. That's when you're traveling long distances or when you're managing fleets where speed of charge becomes important. What are we doing to address this market? Well, the market is changing very fast. Technology is changing rapidly. The cost of that technological change is humongous.
Okay.
And so I don't think that, a company that blindly imports from China, assembles in India, and then sells in India as a Make in India product is going to have a sustainable business model long term. It has to be something that is innovated in India for India. And so if you look at our own future, what we are betting on, it's on our own design philosophy, which is really to make the product as frictionless as possible, to look at how we can use the feedback loop from information from customers' experiences to create something that is safe, that is scalable. For example, our 60 kilowatt chargers become 120 on the road, 120 kilowatts, 180 kilowatts become 240. The whole charger is scalable because it was built for the higher capacity in the first place anyway. But most importantly, to create something that is frictionless, right? So the customer must not have a failure, and the customer must have an experience that would be similar to what you get in a Tesla, for example. So how we achieve that? We are a big traffic company also. We do speed enforcement across many states in India, including some southern Indian states like Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. We have our own software engine, automatic number plate reading engine for our cameras. So it reads the number plate and creates a challan. Right. But we've retrofitted that on our charging stations. So with the camera on top of the charger, when the car is maneuvering to park at the charger, the camera has already read the number plate, created the pre-authorization for the transaction, and so when the customer comes, picks up the gun and connects, it's done already.
It's ready already.
So we're looking at creating an experience that is frictionless and seamless, using the different other technological capabilities that we have to address something in a uniquely Indian way.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned about traveling all around India in EV. So we have been speaking to some auto journalists in Kerala and discussing EVs and all. Their almost unanimous feedback is that you can travel anywhere in South India with an EV. They're blindly saying in court, I can blindly take my EV to everywhere South India. No pressure, nothing, no confusion in that. How is the adaptation change across the Indian demographics? Because I think the government is looking at these places in a very unanimous manner. I mean, in a very standard manner. But some states are picking up. What would be the reason of states like Kerala, or Karnataka, and Maharashtra is picking the adaptation at a very higher interest rate or higher rate?
It's a good question, and I can only give you my opinion. It might be the wrong opinion. I can only tell you from my experience. But states like Kerala and Goa typically have been early adopters for everything. So when you look at new car being launched, you get the maximum bookings in these cities. So early adoption means willing to take the risk. Willingness to take the risk comes from higher education, right? I mean, 99% of Kerala is literate, maybe even 100% now. Most people have gone through higher education, have done a university degree. So there is a lot of capability to make analytical decisions. And so in these states, you're finding that adoption to be much higher simply as a result of that. Having said that, if you were to look at the pure data, in fact, the highest number of guns in India is available in Gujarat. It's not really in Kerala. It's because policies of various state governments have made sure that these implementations have happened, right? The way our policy structure is structured today, the government, the central government asked the PSU oil companies to implement fast chargers across their real estate assets around India, and they had tenders for 1,000 or 3,000 chargers at a time. So you saw massive rollouts across the country, right? Whether these chargers are resilient and available 99% of the time as we guarantee on our network is another question. I have never used them, so I don't know. I'm only telling you what the press says, and so my information inputs are from publicly available press reports. But the implementation across India is actually quite phenomenal. It's not happening only in pockets, though it seems like that. I know when you drive in Kerala, I drove the other day from Thrissur to Coimbatore, and I passed 40 charging stations, and it was phenomenal to see that. It was more penetration than you get in Norway.
A lot of cars.
So I think the competition is vibrant. But at the same time, when you're driving from, say, Bangalore to Ahmedabad, you will be able to stop continuously without any pressure or anxiety about when the next charger is, because there's a significantly high number of chargers. It's not perhaps as visible as it is in Kerala. So I think the implementation has been reasonable, aggressive, quite, the same across India. There are just some pockets today in states where traditionally the uptake has been last or laggard, and it'll happen eventually as well.
So we have been using Quench charging station for a while, the CoEC, and there are two specific feedbacks that I would like to share with you. One is that people who are not even much technical into that field, or investors or people who associate with us, specifically ask for Quench chargers because it looks good, because of the aesthetic of it. Now the other thing, from us, the feedback is that Quench is one of the companies that we get credible, reliable, fast, with less time consuming feedbacks and service and maintenance. That shows how comprehensively Quench is looking at the business. In one sense, you're taking care of what your machine, your hardware represents in the eyes of people in some way, in an aesthetic way. On the other hand, you are becoming a very keen player in terms of, or a very serious player in terms of what you're doing. How do you do this? What is the process? What is coming next?
Thank you for asking that, and also the wonderful comments that you've made. It's very kind. When we launched in 2020, we wanted to create a product that India would be proud of. So, it was meant to be street furniture that was beautiful, aesthetic, and that in some ways represented the aesthetics of India. So, for example, our 60 and 120 kilowatt classic product actually has a face which is inspired by the Kathakali dance mask, and the tusks on the side, which light up to tell you whether you're charging or not charging, are a nod in many ways to the Indian culture. So aesthetics was really a key component of the design language that we were rolling out. Having said that, what's most important to a customer on the road is that the charger is available and able to provide a charge when you approach it. Availability means that the charger is reliable and able to provide a charge when you connect, is resilient. And resilient means that as the car companies change their software, you're catching up with it, you're able to do it quickly so that the customer has a seamless experience. So resilience and reliability has been the bedrock of what we're delivering, because providing a charger is only 50% of the relationship. Keeping that charge alive ensures that a charge point operator can make revenues from this. Otherwise, it's a very expensive steel cupboard sitting on the side of the road. So what we did was, we have 35 software code writers as part of our team. We created our tech team, well, our software tech team, not our hardware tech team,
Sorry.
we created our own network operations center software. So
Okay.
it's basically a software hub, which is monitoring every one of our chargers on a 60-second heartbeat.
Okay.
And providing information, diagnostics, and prognostics. Because
Okay,
if it's something is happening at 45 degrees in Kerala, you can prognose it'll happen in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
Because you're seeing
Got
a
it,
hotspot
got
of
it,
activity
got it.
based on temperature or weather or something else. So you can do a lot
So
of
each and every charger is
statistical-
monitored like that.
on a 60-second heartbeat. And we have a set of error codes that we're monitoring. Those error codes are then linked to spare parts, and those spare parts are linked to standard operating procedures to replace those spare parts. So when you have a problem that's cropped up, on the map of India, you'll have a little red dot that says, "Please help me, I'm in trouble." And then the network operations center can identify what needs to be done. And there's 3 levels that we do. The first one is we can do something from the network operations center, which is reset the charger or give it new software. We can send the local authorized and trained electrical subcontractor and tell them what parts to take and what SOPs to take to replace them. And the third one is we have to then deploy, because this seems to be a problem that the first 2 could not sort out. So we set this process up. And, we're not inventing the wheel here. Most companies, whether you're providing equipment to hospitals, anything doing critical equipment works in a similar manner. We just created a methodology and then a software to support our methodology that we wrote ourselves, to be able to provide a customer rapid response of, sometimes within 4 hours of something happening. We are all in a learning experience. This is a new world, right? So things will happen. You can write all of these algorithms, and then something new will happen. In defense, they say no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and that's absolutely true. You can plan for everything and something else happens.
Yes, it's true that.
And so, there's always friction in small ways. The customers get upset, and you've got to move very fast to make sure that you resolve the issue. That's part and
parcel of this,
Yeah.
I wanted to address this before, but we spoke about how the test is happening, how the hardware is tested, how these safety measures are happening. But in my view, or when I look into it, the next set of security issues comes from the software, that phase. The software is cyber attacks and cyber, kind of intruding into the software would happen. That it will be vulnerable in some point of time. How do you see that? I heard that you were saying about your team and etc. But I just wanted to get into a little more about the importance of software, the importance of us developing and owning the software, and the potential dangers of that.
Yeah, excellent question. And I'll answer both questions, because there was one second part to your previous question on what the future of tech is. I'll answer both. Let's talk about cybersecurity first.
Okay.
Because our chargers are deployed and used in Australia and parts of Europe, cybersecurity becomes a big issue because it's public infrastructure. So we have undertaken a VAPT test and certification. That's a vulnerability assessment and penetration test.
Okay.
So, you basically employ a bunch of experts to come and penetrate your charger and try to take control of it and find backdoors, loopholes, and any areas of weakness where your charger can be compromised, and information can be taken, or the charger can be hijacked. Right.
Okay.
So, a cyber strike could be where all chargers across a country are shut down. Right. So when we did the VAPT, we had a really great company that did it for us. Worked with our software team. We identified 5 issues that that we had vulnerabilities on. This was done in 2024.
2024.
And so proactively we were able to address each one of those to make sure 2 of them were with the controller, 2 of them were with the hardware, and 1 of them was with the communications device. So we had to work either ourselves with our software company or with our hardware device providers to make sure that they were able to close the hole. And in 2 instances, even the device provider came back and said, "Thank you, we did not know about this. Their own testing had not identified this." So yes, it becomes absolutely important to ensure that your device is protected. But I can proudly tell you we have a certificate from 2024, but I can also assure you that means nothing now, and you have to do it again in 2025 because these threats change all the time. And so if you want to be an active participant in this industry, then there is a commitment. There's a commitment to spending a lot of money on R&D to make sure that your technology is keeping up as the industry moves. And there's a big commitment to spending money on making sure that you're cyber secure. And that you're constantly testing and having the right people, validate, test, probe any threat that could come from any changes that you made on your charger or changes in tech that have happened. The second part of your previous question was, where's the tech going? And other than the ANPR, what I can tell you is, if you look at our NOC on any given day, across your network and other networks, about 11 to 12% of chargers are not functioning because electricity is not available.
Yeah.
So our uptime for our network today is about 99%. We're very proud of that. But the impact of chargers not getting electricity creates two problems. For a CPO, there's no revenue because it's an expensive box, and for the customer, there's anxiety. I came here, I expected to be able to do it, right? So that's the Indian problem. On the European and Australian side, it's not the problem of energy not being regular. The problem is energy not being available. So you might want to put a 150 kilowatt charger in a location, and the grid will tell you, I can only give you 60 kilowatts. You have to wait 2 years for 150 kilowatts. So there's two separate problems here, both related to energy unavailability or irregularity. And so we have innovated a best charger solution, a battery energy storage. So it's a battery wall with a DC-DC charger. So it's not an AC-DC charger to make it more efficient so that you're not losing so much electricity in providing the service. We have a DC-DC charger. We have a battery wall, and then we have a energy management system platform that we have created that basically can swap energy from either the grid or from solar to this battery pack, right? And then that battery pack can give 250 kilowatts of energy to the DC-DC charger, and you can then charge a bus or a car in a location where you might get only 60 kilowatts from the grid. Either the grid is charging a battery pack when you're not demanding it for charging a car, so 60 kilowatts can continuously come to charge the battery. Or if you've got a solar farm next to you, you actually use solar when it's available, and you switch off the grid and you move to the grid when the solar is not available to make sure your battery pack's always charged. Or if you've got high demand at night, you can still use the battery pack and grid. And all of this is in the platform that we have created, our EMS platform, which very actively swapping energy sources between grid, solar, and battery to make sure that the customer is able to get a very efficient DC-DC charge at 150 to 250 kilowatts of power. So that's one innovation that has happened, and it's not just an Indian-driven innovation, it's a global one. The second one is as fleet becomes a very big part. So, you have Blue Smart and Lithium doing taxi fleets, but you also have big bus fleets, right? To recreate a 120 kilowatt charger box continuously across fleet stations is expensive. And the technology will move to dispensers. So you have the power electronics in a cabinet that sits separately, and then you have just very thin dispenser guns that are giving you between 60 to 240 kilowatt. Of charge if you do not want to go to liquid. You could get slightly higher if you're going to a higher amp gun, but above that you need a liquid cooled gun. But let's say for the moment, for the next 12 months before the technology has to move again, it'll be dispensers that can do between 30 kilowatt to 240 kilowatt per gun, and you'll have from one power unit either 4 or 6 or 8 guns, and the power coordination cabinet could be 360 kilowatts, 480 kilowatts, or 640 kilowatts, right? So you're addressing a fleet because you really do need to have multiple parking bays. You need to be able to move fast. You need to give a high charge. You might get a bus, you might get a car, and so your demand might be different, and you have to charge many vehicles at the same time. So that drops the cost of capital. Because all your power electronics is in one cabinet, and then you've just got dispensers rather than recreating 120 or 180 kilowatt charger at every parking bay, right? So I think that's where the technology is moving. What we are excited about is that we are generating this intellectual property, being a tech house, so to speak, in this world, in India, both for the Indian market and the global market.
That is something that I want to address. Is that this is an emerging market. There is rapid changes, rapid technologies coming, and things are in flux. It's moving forward. So the importance of intellectual property and the rights, especially in a state like or a nation like India, is important. How do a market leader like Quench is addressing that? And in general, can you comment that is there enough awareness is happening in terms of intellectual property rights and keeping that in the correct holders?
Yeah, there's two ways to answer your question. It's a good question. Our intellectual property laws are weak. And if there's anything that keeps an entrepreneur awake at night, it is the fact that intellectual property can so easily be stolen and a competitor being created, right? So you could set up a lot of firewalls and a lot of processes around that and spend a lot of energy on protecting your intellectual property there. You could determine who downloaded what, who printed what. You got software that can have cameras that are watching. We've tended not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We've instead held the argument that intellectual property in our, well, not the technology in our industry is moving so fast
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we should just focus on staying ahead with the intellectual
Okay.
property, because by the time somebody is catching up with
Catching up
you,
with
you
us,
need to be one step ahead
yeah,
again, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
focus on being ahead of the wave and being at the pointy end, and don't worry about the
What is
catch up,
coming.
because the catch up will happen anyway, because there's so much being done in China, and
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
got
yeah.
so much competition that it is going to end up in India. They've got significant support from the government there for intellectual property development. They've got great economies of scale.
Yeah.
So I'd rather we focus on what's for India, what are the niche markets we play in, and how do we stay ahead, rather than worrying about, what is the competition doing and can people copy us, because that'll happen all the time.
So do you think that we can, with the current context that the India is in, and with the current context that where R&D and costs and everything else is happening, do you think that India can become a world leader, competing with major players that we mentioned, Europe, China, etc., etc.? And can we be a major player in terms of the market, in the car market, along with the infrastructure provider? Can we do that? What are the
Yeah.
challenges?
It's a good question. There's so many things going on in my head with that question. First up, I think if you were to look at India as an automotive country, we are probably already one of the top three
Yeah, we are the top
countries when it comes to small cars. Right?
Yes,
We
yes,
make more
yes,
small
yes, yes.
cars here in
We're third, I
various
guess.
segments. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we already have that competence, and so India is already on the table, right? As the economy grows, you will see that competence move to larger car formats. And so I'm very confident that India as an automotive hub, the moment has arrived, right?
Okay.
And that is going to happen. How is that demonstrated? Well, look at the fact that Tata and Mahindra have been the most aggressive in their electric vehicle launches in India, and their technology is, for the most part, homegrown, right?
Yeah.
They've developed the competence. They've learned from the countries of both China and Europe, and created something that is for India, that is sophisticated, that is exciting.
Challenges the world standards.
Challenges the world standards. Absolutely right. So, India is here to stay, and I think it'll be only a matter of time before you see Mahindra cars, in Australia, the electric cars being used in Australia, South Africa, and other parts of the world. Your question, though, says, can we be competitive?
Yeah.
In the segments where we've got scale, we're already competitive, right? And counter that to, where is China more competitive? Where they have scale. Where is Europe more competitive? Where they have scale, right? So our challenge is to build that scale to make sure that we are able to stay competitive, and therefore plow back a large amount of profits or revenues into further technology development to keep us ahead of it, right? Ahead on the technological race. But if you look at the PLIs that the government came up with, it's about one thing only. It's about driving scale in India. Right? So the spaces to watch for me, other than just the cars that I've talked about, is watch the buses, because India is doing a lot of innovation in the bus space.
I guess the BYD buses are becoming very popular.
Well, the Electras came first, but hey, the largest sellers today are Indian companies, right? Look at JBM's order book, and you'd be surprised. Look at Switch's order book, you'd be surprised. There's Eka, exciting company out of Pune that is launched buses. What the Indian manufacturers are doing in this space is very exciting. It's innovative. It's for India. It's beyond the requirements of the CCS2 protocol to be more efficient. So no, I'm very, very bullish on the story of India. The challenge for infrastructure manufacturers such as us, for charging companies, for charger manufacturers, is to make sure that we grow and scale so that we stay competitive in this race and are able to plow back a decent amount of our revenues into technological development as India starts to become unique in its own way to be able to address that.
So we spoke about where the industry is growing. We spoke about technology. We spoke about the international market, how the competency of Indian market, etc., etc. But what would be the policies that you would like to have in India, which will boost the adaptation much, much, much higher rate?
Okay. Your question is really about adoption.
Yes.
And I think the policies that the government has so far on adoption are incredibly successful. We used to pose this question to a lot of people in 2021, and everybody had a different agenda. The bus guys had a different agenda, the battery guys had a different agenda. I think the prerogative for India today is to make sure that all the battery factories, the giga factories that are scheduled to go live in 2026, there's 3 of them do go live. so that we have a competence to make and pack cells in India, which will drastically reduce both the cost as well as our reliance on China in a geopolitical way. Secondly, I think the government incentives in some instances for the two-wheelers is drying up. That's fine because there's been a significant adoption there already. There is already a use case that says using electric is cheaper than using petrol. So the argument has been achieved. Government policies to promote public transportation's move to clean energy deserves to continue over the next 5 or maybe 8 years. As far as the cars go, I think what we have today is great. Some states have no stamp duty and lesser tax when you have an electric car. That'll probably survive another 3, 4, 5 years till there's a majority adoption, and then they're going to have to tax everyone. And I think that's fine as well. The normal story of India is that we have a lopsided policy, and for once, India has done an absolutely great job, right? And it's been well thought through. It was driven from the top. It was about moving us to clean energy because we want to have clean skies in India, because we want to not rely on geopolitics and problems in import of oil and spending great dollars on import of oil. The focus was sharp. The objectives were clear, and the results are evident right in front of us today and where we've gone to. So, no, I don't have a particular begging bowl request for the government that says do this or do that, because I think they're doing a really good job so far. If I were to say what I would like to see is enforcement of localization through not just policy, but also through everything else that follows policy. So if you want funding, then prove to me or localized, just like it happened in the two-wheeler industry across the spectrum, right? So that we develop the power electronics competence, not just for chargers, but on board a vehicle. Whether it's the 3-in-1 DC converters on a vehicle or the onboard charger controllers, there's a lot of stuff that can become Indian very fast. And I think this, now we're in the trickle down where government policy can start focusing on that.
I wanted to draw your attention to something else, which is a word that's been used in a plethora of times, and it's a very word that kind of losing in meanings in the context, and the word is sustainability. A lot of people are talking about this. A lot of people are talking a lot of things about it. There is a lot of information about it. There's plenty of information about it, and there are also counter narratives going on beneath the walls. So, what are we doing? What is Quench doing to improve the sustainability? Do you think that the current methods that we are using, or the way that we are going ahead, will kind of solve some of at least the major concerns that we are facing right now?
Yeah, that's a hard question. And so I'll tell you why we wake up in the morning every day. And it is because our mission is to ensure that the cities where we are deployed have cleaner air because of a small contribution that we made. So children going to school can live longer because they're breathing in less pollution, right? So across all of our products, I mean, not just in Quench, we also make products for hydrogen, we make products for pollution control. We come to work every day because our mission is driven by sustainability, but we measure it in the small contribution that we make, because we know that, in the end, everybody has a role to play. And you can only be proud of that little role that you play. A lot of times I get asked questions about what's the point of having electric transportation if the majority of your power is generated by coal, right? Yeah, that's a fair comment, right? But if you had power generated by coal and you had a diesel bus in your city, you've got still 2 times the pollution, right? So by moving to electric and electric transportation in a city to transport people, you're still actually halving the emissions because you've done the first step of the way. So I'd look at it that way and take energy from that, going, that's my first step. Next, I've got to address the coal. The second bit is a lot of people don't realize that 40% of India's energy mix is already renewable, right? When you take the immense amount of wind and solar assets that we've deployed, plus the hydro assets that are in the Northeast, 40% plus of the energy mix today is renewable. And by 2030, that'll be 50% plus. So we can take comfort from the fact that we are all working towards that sustainability mission, that sustainability direction. Sure, a lot of people use it. It's in every annual report of companies because it's become the buzzword. But the fact is, as a country, India is moving in the right direction when you measure the little bits of things that everybody in this ecosystem has done to achieve greater sustainability.
We are also doing a little bit regarding that. We are planning to have our power generation from sustainable energy in the coming years. So the entire supply chain would be we are the
be
creators
green.
of power and the suppliers of power. So we are
Excellent.
also planning that.
Excellent. And as the energy mix goes up, then you'll be able to buy direct
Yeah.
green energy, right?
Yeah.
Which means that you can be confident that you're giving a pure clean energy
Yes.
experience to your customers.
It was nice talking to you, Ravin. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to have been on the podcast.